You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. Your Twitter account...
Only Rosie O'Donnell.
I don't understand how he's able to get away with the things he gets away with, breaking the law, the emoluments clause, taking bribes, blackmailing people. He's a criminal con man. And if you grew up in New York, as I did, you knew this your whole life. We watched his planes get repossessed off the runway at LaGuardia. We watched him try to sell steaks and cologne and a fake university, steal money from charities that his family can't even have a charity anymore in New York City, in the New York State, because they had stolen money from kids' cancer charities. There's no way you can look at the facts about this man and believe in him still. You have to have willful blind.
In 2016, Donald Trump mocked Rosie O'Donnell in a moment that was supposed to be a punchline. His words, "Only Rosie O'Donnell," seemed trivial, but they signified much more. It was the beginning of something far bigger than a mere was a declaration of war. For years, Rosie stayed quiet, not giving Trump the satisfaction of a response. But now, she's back, and she's not laughing. On live television, Rosie dismantled Trump's carefully crafted persona. She didn't hold back, exposing him for what he truly is, a fraud, a con artist, and the most dangerous liar to ever hold
him as America's biggest successful businessman, and he had been bankrupt 6 times, and he had lots of charges of sexual abuse against him, and he is, known for lying and for corruption, and he had a charity that he and his family now can never do a charity again in New York because they stole money from children who had cancer.
And this is all fact.
All you need to find out these facts is a computer, people. I am not an investigative journalist. I simply lived there my whole life. And in New York, where he grew up as well, we're around the same age. I'm 63, he's 107. 2006, when he was just a embarrassment in New York. Nobody respected him in any way. Forbes never would put him on the richest people list because they couldn't verify his income because he was often broke. He's a con man, period. And if you grew up in New York like I did, you knew that. But he got on that show, and Mark Burnett, the producer, taught him that if you tell a lie long enough on TV, people will believe it, just how they do Fox News. That's not a news station, that's an entertainment station. And they were fined millions of dollars for...
Office Rosie didn't come with empty words. She came with receipts. With calm precision, Rosie broke down Trump's entire self-made narrative, exposing the hollow foundation of the empire he built. What she revealed wasn't just petty back, was something much more significant. Trump's facade, crafted over decades of manipulation, was finally unmasked. In a world built on lies, Rosie's truth could very well mark the end of the Trump era. And if Americans are listening, it could be the end of dirty politics as we know it. Rosie wasn't just calling Trump a con artist, she was explaining how he executed the greatest deception in modern political history, from his fake wealth to the reality TV fame.
And it seems very strange to me that the President of the United States has so many friends who are sexual abusers. And people have just really had enough. They've had enough of a president who separates families and puts babies in cages. You know all of the catchphrases. Every day he does something worse than the day before. And he tops it and tops it and tops it. I believe that Trump is loathed in America, that people are embarrassed and ashamed of who he is, and that come election day, we're going to stand up at the polls and let him know. And unless he goes in and has the Russians kind of fix it like he did last time in 2016, we're going to see him gone. And that's what I'm waiting and hoping for, and hoping that people across the country are inspired to use their own voice in whatever way to get people to know.
That propelled him to political power. Trump had convinced millions that he was some kind of titan. But Rosie made it clear, he's nothing more than a borrower, not a builder. He didn't create his wealth, he inherited it, propped up by his father's money and a facade of success that even Forbes couldn't validate. The truth is simple: Trump's empire was built on lies, and the American people were duped into believing in his mythical status. Trump's greatest deception wasn't just the business world or his fame, it was the role he played in the public eye. Rosie pointed out how
mentally unstable man. And Duty to Warn was a book that came out when he was first in office. Psychiatrists across the country who don't ever really diagnose people that they don't serve personally came together and made a book, Duty to Warn, to tell the world what a narcissistic, mentally ill person he is. And I think he's the worst thing that ever happened to the United States, and his cruelty knows no bounds. And when he is upset and humiliated and embarrassed, he has no control and he goes apeshit. Can I say that?
The Apprentice. which Trump claimed to run, wasn't even a real business venture. It was a carefully scripted performance, a smoke and mirrors show designed to sell the public an illusion of power and wealth. The networks didn't just air the show, they helped fuel the lie, broadcasting Trump as the perfect CEO, the man who could run a country. But in reality, he was nothing more than an illusionist, playing the role of a successful businessman while his actual record of bankruptcies and failed ventures was carefully hidden. For Rosie, Trump's rise to power wasn't an accident, it was a result of masterful psychology.
Can you explain to me, though, I cannot believe that every Republican congressman or woman, every Republican senator is stupid.
Well, they're not stupid, but they're definitely afraid of him. People in America are afraid of him. They're afraid to stand up to him, against him, because, and when I did on The View in 2006, I remember Joy Behar saying, you're not going to say that out there, because he had a press conference right before we were live, where he had a teenager, Tara O'Connor, who was Miss Teen USA. She had kissed a girl in the Village, and they took a picture and put it on all the newspapers. And he made her do a press conference where she apologized. And it looked to me like a pimp and a prostitute. And I said that on the air. And then I proceeded to list facts, not hyperbole, just facts about who he was and what he did. Bankrupt all these times, money from his father, not a self-made man, can't quantify his riches on Forbes magazine. I just said facts, and you would think that I called his mother a whore.
Logical warfare. He didn't just manipulate the media, he turned it into a weapon. He transformed voters into viewers, truth into ratings, and corruption into entertainment. He wasn't just a businessman or a celebrity, he was a product, a manufactured persona that millions of Americans bought into. And once Trump believed the hype, there was no turning back. Rosie warned that this media manipulation had gone far beyond what anyone could have imagined. The very people who should have been calling out the lies were the ones perpetuating them, as much as Trump built his empire on a lie. His silence on real issues was deafening.
Because of him, I read Project 2025. That was pretty much the foundation of what he wanted to do. And I said, I have to get out of here. And I left before the inauguration on purpose, because for 20 years, he's been using me as a punchline in all of his jokes.
I know.
And he's a very unbalanced individual. And it's very dangerous to be in his target range. And for 4 years when he was in last time, it was not a good time for me. And I have a little child who's 12 who has autism, and I have to be on top of my game. I have to be mentally and emotionally there and present. And I didn't want to be distracted by him or have him play such a major role in my reality.
Rosie pointed to the moment when Trump held a press conference to forgive a teenage girl for kissing another girl. While that might have seemed like a progressive moment, it was overshadowed by his complete inaction on his own history of sexual misconduct. Rosie didn't hold back, calling Trump's actions a hypocritical spectacle, a pimp showcasing a victim. It wasn't just a punchline, it was a portrait of a deeply flawed man who had spent his career covering up his misdeeds. For Rosie, it wasn't just about Trump's corruption, it was about the damage he had done to America, particularly to those who had suffered at the hands of abusive men. She shared how Trump's election had triggered something far deeper than political grief for many Americans. It had unleashed a national trauma for millions of women, minorities, and people with abusive pasts. Trump wasn't just a politician, he was a reminder of the men who cause harm and get away with it.
Nothing but the lowest bar for Donald Trump. And, every single day he just grants my perception of him as correct by his actions, by his words, by his horrible Truth Social that is failing. And, he is the kind of person that is a grifter. And he is an evangelical preacher to people who believed that Celebrity Apprentice was true. And Celebrity Apprentice was not true. And Mark Burnett has tapes of him calling people every racist word in the world, telling women to get down on their knees. Mark Burnett owns the cache of all of Trump's sickness, and he refuses to release it. And I think that's a sin, because what's happening...
His victory didn't just signify a political win, it signified a dark moment in history, one that resonated on a psychological level for those who had suffered abuse. Rosie made her truth personal, but in doing so, she made it universal. She wasn't just talking about Trump's politics. She was talking about a deep, psychological wound that millions of Americans carry with them every day. She called it national PTSD, the collective trauma of living through a presidency that felt like a trigger, a reminder of the worst parts of American history. Rosie's words hit hard. But they weren't just a critique of Trump's politics, they were an urgent warning about what happens when we ignore the damage done by those in power. What Rosie laid bare wasn't just Trump's cruelty, it was the complicity of everyone around him. She called out the Republican senators who ran from tough questions, the ones who cowered in elevators when asked about Epstein, or turned a blind eye when it came to Trump's misconduct. She revealed a startling truth. Trump didn't act alone. He had a team of spineless cowards who allowed his lies to fester, who feared his tweets more than the consequences of their own actions. These aren't foolish people, they're